So if we go to China, Wuhan is infamous for its toxic air and its polluted air, and it has massive amounts of respiratory disease. And people, we were told, started to get ill. What they did, there's about 200 to start with, and what they did is they took lung fluid from a handful of them, and they decided that this, quote, illness was a new virus. And it was decided on the basis of absolutely no evidence. There is a technique, a long-held technique, in fact, since 1890, called Koch postulates, which is used by mainstream medicine, or should be, to show that A, there is an infectious agent, and B, that your infectious agent is causing what you say it's causing. And the first postulate on which all the others depend is that you must isolate your infectious agent, in this case, what they're calling SARS-CoV-2, you must isolate that free of all other genetic contamination, so you only have what you say is the disease-causing agent. You then have to, as these postulates unfold, put that into a living host, and that living host has to get what you say that infectious agent is causing. You then have to take material from that living host, put it in another living host, and it has to get what you say is causing the disease. Not one single one of those postulates, not least the isolation of the alleged virus, has been done. Not one. There is not a single scientific paper or study anywhere in the world that has isolated this virus and showed it to exist. So how did they then start diagnosing this virus in China, in Wuhan, where there's this enormous respiratory disease? They did it on symptoms. And what did they say? They said the symptoms of this virus are flu-like symptoms. I mean, blimey, hello, flu-like symptoms in Wuhan? Where do you start? And so what was causing disease, respiratory disease before, was now discarded, and now it's COVID-19. And this is why around the world, the figures for flu deaths in 2020 have gone down on the year-by-year average as COVID deaths have gone up. It's a redesignation of diagnosis. And I'll come to the financial incentives for that in a second.
Right, the hospitals are benefiting from this, correct? They're being paid.
Massively. So then, having started out diagnosing this virus, they've not isolated and shown to exist on symptoms. They introduced something called the RT-PCR test. I mean, don't start me. The RT-PCR test, which is what is leading the authorities to claim that all these people have tested positive for COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2, is not testing for a virus. First of all, you can't test for a virus you've not isolated, because how can you test for something you've not isolated and got its genetic code? You can't. You can't get a vaccine for it either, by the way. So what it's testing for, this RT-PCR test, is a genetic material which can be found in the bodies. If they amplify the material, blow it up enough, it can be found in everybody. They can create a situation where they amplify this genetic material, which this test is looking for, so much that every single one will test positive for what they claim is a virus, but it's not a virus, it's a genetic material. And the creator of the RT-PCR test was Kerry Mullis in the 1980s. He won the Nobel Prize for it. And he said, this test, the man who created it, must not be used to diagnose infectious disease. That's exactly what they're using it for. So they're getting their cases through symptoms diagnosis, which same as many other diseases from other sources, And they're getting their cases from a RT-PCR test, which is not testing for a virus, but a genetic material that can be found ultimately in everybody. And they're getting the deaths from re-diagnosis of people dying of other things. So the authorities in Italy, after that big furore and crisis, admitted that 99% of those that were designated to have died in Italy of COVID-19 had 1, 2, 3, 4 or more, what they call morbidities and other reasons to die. And they said, actually, we were generous in designating people with COVID-19. We have had people who have died in motorcycle accidents, who've fallen down the stairs, who've died of cancer and heart disease, and on the death certificate has gone COVID-19. This is where the numbers are coming from. And some doctors have bravely come out and been deleted very quickly. And some of them have talked to me and said, we're being pressured and pressured to put COVID-19 on the death certificate when they've not died of anything to do with that, not even respiratory disease. And I had a posting on my website about a couple of weeks ago, and it was a recorded telephone conversation between a member of the public and the coroner's office in Britain. And the member of the public was questioning why their loved one had not had a death diagnosis yet. And the lady at the coroner's office said, well, we did a test, a COVID-19 test, after the guy had died, and we sent it off and we've not had the result back yet. And she said, if it comes back positive, COVID-19 will go on the death certificate. And if it comes back negative, then there'll be a post-mortem. And so we're having a situation in country after country after country, because of this spider control of the national medical pyramids, whereby doctors are being pressured and ordered to put COVID-19 on the death certificate for anything that moves. And then we come, as we talked about there, the financial incentives. They changed the rules in America so that if a hospital diagnoses regular pneumonia, they get paid $4,600. If they diagnose the same symptoms as COVID-19 pneumonia, they get $13,000 for the patient. And for putting a COVID-19 diagnosis on a ventilator, it's $39,000.
But David, I have friends that are doctors, and they're telling me till they're blue in the face, you don't know how real this really is. You don't understand. This is killing everybody. I'm like, man, calm down, calm down. I try to explain to them that it's all the same symptoms as the flu. What do you say to those doctors that are calling me and telling me you don't understand? Does this have anything to do with the technology, the new technology rollout? It has to have.
Well, the point I've made in interviews since this started, the point I make in the ATSA, is that there is a small number of people that are getting lung effects that are very strange. And there have been doctors that have gone on the internet and talked about this from, emergency units and saying, look, what I'm seeing is not a virus. Absolutely, there's no virus. But it's something I've never seen before. This is what one said before having the video deleted. He said, it's like, it's what I see in their lungs is what I would expect from someone at 30,000 feet if the cabin depressurized without oxygen, or if you plonk someone on the top of Everest without oxygen. This is what you would expect to see in their lungs. And when you look at the rollout of 5G, and the impact of 5G is still in its infancy, because it's still being rolled out in terms of the communication masts and antenna. But the real power of 5G in terms of its impact on psychology and on human health comes as more and more and more people get 5G devices. Because every time you activate a device, you make a connection to the source. And say you're in a train and lots of people are on the phone, and they're 5G phones, that train is awash with 5G. Whereas it wouldn't be, even if 5G was transmitting, but people weren't on the phone in the 5G phones in the train, it would be less. So the more this rollout happens and the more people start using 5G devices, the impact of 5G will get greater. But even at the level it is now, you look at the band of frequency within the 5G millimeter range at 60 gigahertz, and this is accepted by the telecommunications industry. At 60 gigahertz, 5G interacts with the frequency of oxygen molecules and makes it far more difficult for the body and the bloodstream to absorb oxygen. Now, this is where everything connects. They want to deprive humanity of oxygen because not least that leads to respiratory disease, which they are dubbing COVID-19. And what is going to happen with all these people wearing masks all day, breathing in their own carbon dioxide, which the body is trying to expel? It's going to cumulatively lead to far more respiratory disease, and they're going to call it COVID-19. So there is a 5G element to this, absolutely, but not causing the virus, but what 5G and electromagnetic fields in general, this is well known, can do is generate the symptoms of what they say is COVID-19. These, for instance, flu-like symptoms. And Wuhan, of course, had a big rollout of 5G just ahead of this thing kicking off. And if you look at the deaths, etc., in America, an enormous, absolutely enormous chunk of them come from two states, New Jersey and New York.
Yeah, the biggest 5G rollout.
Yeah. So and you know, when you have the authorities targeting people for making any suggestion of a connection between 5G and what's happening, you know there's a connection. I'll give you an example. We have an organization in Britain called Ofcom, the Office of Communications, and it's the government's censor for the mainstream media. They want to move into the alternative media as well. And it's the organization that hands out the contracts, if you like, for 5G, the frequencies for 5G, right? So it has massive conflict of interest. But what it did through this period, especially when I started talking about it, and everyone's knickers started getting twisted on a monumental scale, is that they told the mainstream media that they would face sanctions from Ofcom if they allowed anyone, even a single person, to go on the air and suggest any connection between 5G and this quote virus. So you know by that alone that there is a connection. But
David, we're gonna start taking questions from the audience now, and I think Laura had another question for you as well. Okay. So Laura, you want to ask your question, and then we'll go into the questions from the audience because we have a lot of audience members they can't wait to ask you questions. So.
Yeah, totally. That's a great idea. We've been breathing in the chemtrails. There's been geoengineering. There's a lot that we never consented to or voted for that we can claim sovereignty and not consent. But it seems that even with that, it's really being forced upon a person. The survival of job and family is being heavily manipulated. And I'm seeing that we're all going to band together and rebuild the world in the way that it's supposed to be. But it's like a race against time, and it just. I mean, is this the necessary catalysts that are needed for people's great awakening? And it is a race against time, and it was inevitable that we were going to face such opposition because these agendas have been in the works for a while, and that when we do move into these higher levels of consciousness, we can transmute and alchemize these assaults so that we're not like, you know, against our will being slowly modified. I mean, isn't our consciousness powerful enough to transmute this if we can reach these levels and shift the collective consciousness together?
Well, absolutely. That's one of the themes of the answer is, see, if, for instance, this world was solid and physical, then change, by definition, is limited and must be very slow and laborious. But this reality is not physical, it's holographic, it's very malleable, and it responds to consciousness. You see, if you look at human society, all it is an expression of the collective human mind. That's all it is. We are being controlled, not least because vast numbers of people have a self-identity of being little me, I have no power. And, you know, imagine, I say imagine, I say this is how it is. If people think of Wi-Fi and the way Wi-Fi interacts with computers, Wi-Fi is a radiation field of information. And what the computer does is connect with that information, that radiation field, and turns it into a completely different form on the screen, on the computer screen. So if you say to people, you tell me about the internet, they'd say it was graphics and colors and texts and videos on the screen. Well, yes, it is. But the only place the internet exists in that form is on the screen. Nowhere else. Everywhere else, it's Wi-Fi fields and electronic circuits. What the computer does is take that information and put it on the screen. Now, if you are going on the internet, what dictates where you go on the internet? What decisions you make? Your perception. Your perceptions dictate where you want to go on the internet. Someone else with different perceptions will go somewhere else. So your perception is dictating your interaction with, say, this Wi-Fi field. Well, the Wi-Fi field is really mirroring technologically, mimicking the quantum field of possibility and probability that we live within. And what we pull out of that probability and possibility of the quantum field is dictated by our perception. If we have a perception of little me, then what we are transmitting is a frequency field that represents the perception of little me. And that will interact with what I call the cosmic internet, the cosmic Wi-Fi field within that band of frequency. And you will set up a feedback loop, as we do with the internet, deciding where on the internet we go. You set up a feedback loop with the possibility represented by your perceptions. So a little me perception will lead to a little me life, because that's what you are creating. So the perceptions of humanity are dictating the society that we create. And the more that we perceive ourselves to be little me and labels rather than infinite me, the more society will reflect that. People in little me, I've got no power mode, will be creating a situation in which others will have power over them. They are creating that. But when let's look at it from another point of view, you redesign your self-identity. From I'm little me, I have no power, it's I am all that is, has been, and ever can be, having an experience. And that self-identity with that infinite I automatically expands your level of awareness, and automatically you start transmitting on higher, more powerful frequencies. Now you're interacting with the quantum field of possibility and probability at that level. And suddenly what you are pulling into your life as an experience is dramatically different to little me. What do so many people, almost everyone who goes through an awakening process, which is nothing more than removing the onion skins of programming to access what we've always been and always are, what do they say? It was amazing how much synchronicity suddenly came into my life that wasn't there before. Why? Because you're now interacting with the quantum field of possibility and probability on a much vaster scale and a much higher frequency. And so suddenly the fine detail can be brought into your life, which manifests as incredible synchronicity. Oh my God, fancy seeing you here. What's the chances of that? And that this is what my life's been like for 30 years. This is extraordinary day after day synchronicity, which has put information before me. And so what I'm saying is, if the world was solid and limited by solidity, then the chances of change would be very slow and laborious. But because it's malleable, the physical world as we perceive it is just an expression of our perceptions, our consciousness. When our consciousness changes, our external or perceived external world must change, because that's just a holographic projection of our perception. So perception is everything. This is why this cult is desperate to control perception, because it knows it will control behavior, but also it knows how this process works. It knows if it can control perception, it will control your life experience. And to take control of our life back is to take control, A, of our perceptions back, and B, to take control of our self-identity back. And when we change our self-identity from I am my labels to I am the infinite state of awareness, having an experience called those labels, everything changes. And it can change very, very, very quickly. If your perceptions change, where you go on the internet and what you manifest on the screen changes instantly. And that's what happens when you change your perceptions. Because what is this world? This world is a projection of our perception. How does this work? The foundation of this reality is waveform information. Think Wi-Fi. And what the five senses do is they tune into these waves. I mean, take a classic example, sound waves. What's happening now is I'm speaking, but my words are not passing between us. A frequency field generated by my vocal cords is passing between us. What happens then is those sound waves are picked up by the ears and they're turned into electrical signals. And they're communicated to the brain, and the brain then decodes those electrical signals into the sound of my voice. And this happens with all the senses. They lock into these waveform levels of reality, and they then turn them into electrical signals, which is communicated to the brain. And the brain, different parts of the brain, then put this information together to create a reality, a holographic reality. And even our perceptions can even fundamentally affect the way we construct that reality. You know, people can be looking at something and they can apparently see something, and someone next to them will not see what they're seeing, certainly in the same way, because they are constructing reality in a slightly different way. And this is how ridiculous reality is as we perceive it. Here's a question. Does a falling tree make a noise? Only if you hear it. Only if you hear it, for this reason. What is happening on the waveform level, which is the foundation level of this reality, is that a field of energy called a tree is falling through the field of energy. And it creates, as it moves, a vibrational disturbance. What happens if someone is there is they pick up that disturbance, turn it into electrical signals, communicate it to the brain, and the brain decodes that into the sound of a tree falling. If no one's there, the tree falls and makes no noise. We need the observer to create reality. And the observer creates reality on the basis of their perceptions. We keep coming back to the same thing. And so the whole foundation of the cult is to control human perception, because it will then control human behavior and it will dictate human experience. When you break out of that and you stop having your perceptions dictated by authority, then you start to create a different reality for yourself, in which you're no longer little me and you're no longer under the control of some a force of authority.
David, we're gonna jump into questions, because I have a line of people just waiting to ask you all kinds of questions. So we're gonna jump on. So okay, so let's take the first question.
Amazing.
Can David Icke please comment on Trump, Q, and the upcoming U.S. election?
Well, what I said in 2016, in the run-up to Trump's election and afterwards, you can see it on the internet, is that Trump was being brought to power to be a symbol of hatred, to divide American society. I said at the time that the plan was to create a civil war in America to divide and rule American society and break it down into the new society, the new normal that they want. And when you read communist books of techniques of how you transform a society into a Marxist society, in this case, a technocratic Marxist society, one of the rules is you don't target faceless corporations and bureaucrats, even though they may be the ones doing it. You target an individual and you focus all hatred on them. And that's what they've done with Trump. That's why they brought him to power. So politics in America has now become so polarized that it's basically, do you love Trump or hate Trump? That's the decision of where you are in politics. There's no shades of gray in the overwhelming majority of people. So he's been there as a vehicle to divide and rule America, with the woke mentality pushing against the Trump supporters. Of course, how Trump got to power was in the classic political technique of telling people what they wanted to hear. Because of the vast amounts of American society have been completely ignored for years, just like in Britain, where neither party was representing them. And they were getting more and more frustrated with the way America was changing, and no one was listening to them. And then along comes Trump, and he speaks the language of that group. And that group got him elected. But in power, he's basically done nothing that he said would do. But what he has been is a symbol of hatred that has divided American society. And if you look at Trump's background, he's absolutely owned by Israel. This is why he's given Israel everything it asks for, with this Bengali on his shoulder, Jared Kushner, a very close lifelong friend of Benjamin Netanyahu. So Trump is not the independent maverick that he is portrayed as being. He's just another puppet, and Biden is just another one. And at some point, whether it's this election or the next one, they want to bring in a fully fledged woke government, because the woke mentality is the 1% cult mentality, which they've been, again, incubating in the schools and universities for about 2 or 3 generations at least. And they want that to be the dominant force in American politics and American government. And what will that force bring? It will bring tyranny of political correctness, of subjugation of freedom of opinion and free flow of information. It will bring the Green New Deal, which is nothing more than a Marxist manifesto based on the hoax of
that's the AOC deal, right?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
When you look at AOC, what you're starting to see is those, and I do feel sorry for them. I'm not even condemnatory. I do feel sorry for the woke mentality, because young people have been through the most intense perceptual programming for generations now, and more than any other generation in human history, because of the technological impact, the technological element. And those that mentality is now coming out of the schools and universities, and it's moving into politics. AOC is a case of that, and it's manifesting the post-fact society. There's no better way of describing what is happening now and what this woke mentality is doing than Orwell's concept of 2 plus 2 equals 4 being imposed as 2 and 2 equals 5. When you look at the ludicrous transformation of human society based on a virus, I say doesn't exist, but even if you think it does, according to official estimates, your chances of going from infection to fatality, if you're under 70, is 0.004%. Even if you take in the 70 pluses, it's 0.26%. There are official estimates. And we're transforming human society because of it. That is not 2 and 2 equals 4.
Dave, go ahead. Laura, if you want to.
It's
2 equals 5. And what the woke mentality is doing is imposing a world of 2 and 2 equals 5, and making sure that people cannot challenge that without consequences for their careers and their lives.
Dave, we're going to take another question. Laura, do you want to read it?
Say real quick. I mean, it sounds like you're saying that this particular woke is the more engineered kind. It might be connected to BLM and just sort of this false sense of creating positive change, but at the same time, it's on a trajectory that's somewhat artificial and induced.
Well, it's not positive change. It's
but the perception is that it is, but it's not.
It's 1% change. You see, I was brought up on a council estate in Leicester, in England.
We'll take another question.
In the old traditional left. That's where my family was coming from, and where I was coming from. And the traditional left was opposed to the imposition of the rich and powerful upon the rest of the population. It challenged, they were in multimillionaires then, billionaires now. It challenged the imposition of corporations. You can still see on the internet pictures of the big protests at Berkeley from students demanding during the Vietnam era freedom of speech, etc. But what's happened is the traditional left, which was opposing much of the agenda of the cult, has been replaced, hijacked by the woke fake left, which talks about social justice but does nothing about it, that actually is an inversion on purpose because it's a 1% creation. That's why people like George Soros fund it to the tune of staggering amounts of billions. And it's why there is a symbiosis now, which seems on the surface to be bizarre, between a woke mentality that claims to be about social justice and its funding by mega corporations and billionaires. Now, the old traditional left would never have taken money from a Soros or these Silicon Valley corporations and so on. It never would, because it was trying to expose the influence of those organizations, not get into bed with them. But what has changed is this. Woke may talk about social justice, but it's not about social justice. It's about identity, and it's about identity politics. And identity politics has many, many reasons to be created. And one of them is to create more and more fault lines of divide and rule by subdividing and subdividing human self-identity into smaller and smaller units of labels. But as long now as the billionaires and the corporations fund and speak the language of woke and identity politics, then they're now the good guys of the woke fake left, whereas they were the enemy of the traditional signal left. So this has been this transformation on so many levels of now the left, which traditionally is challenging power, is being funded and promoted, not least by the so-called woke corporations of Facebook and Google and YouTube. It's being funded and supported by the very source of that power. And everything has been inverted. And the woke mentality is in such a programmed state that it can't see the obvious, that it's actually got into bed with the reason why there's not social justice. I think it's a form of madness, really.
All right, Dave, we're gonna take another question. We have another question for you. Hold on. Go ahead, Laura. Go ahead and read that for him.
Okay, Elon Musk's technology is a joke compared to what has been developed in the secret space programs. So what is his role here? Alejandro Portillo.
Well, that's a very good point, and it's one I've been making for a long time. Let's go to the underground bases. We live in a world where there are two realities, two foundation realities. One is the reality that humans live in, which is what I call the postage stamp consensus, this narrow band of sense of the possible, and whatever we're told is real. And then there's the cult level. And that operates on a vastly greater level of knowledge, not least technological knowledge. And if you can access this cult world of reality and its projected agenda, or you're involved in it, you can predict the future very, very easily, really. Because unless something intervenes to stop this agenda unfolding, which you've uncovered or you're part of, then it will be the future. And so you have your Aldous Huxleys and you have your George Orwells, who accessed, for whatever reason, in whatever way, they access this projected future and this agenda, which is the projected future. I've quoted people in my books, insiders, who were speaking in like 1969, and they were describing today's society, not in theme, in detail. And you've got Orwell and you've got Huxley in 1932, Orwell in 1948. They're describing technology that was never even available. Drug technology, genetic technology, surveillance technology, that wasn't available then. But they knew it was coming. I quote a guy, a Rockefeller insider from 1969, who described the internet, very clearly described the internet. And he also said, by the way, we're going to make boys and girls the same, which is what this whole transgender thing is really about this fusion of gender that I talked about. So there are these two worlds. And what's happening is this world's agenda is being introduced into our level of reality all the time. And the key to the control and the end game is technology. I've talked about connecting the human brain to AI. It's all about technology, this smart grid, this transhuman, this technocratic society. Now, have a look at how this has played out, this technology coming in. There has not been a point, and increasingly there is not a point, quite obviously, where these guys are sitting around a table, strumming their fingers, waiting for the next level of technology to be developed to advance their agenda of technological control. It doesn't happen.
They already have it.
It's seamless, yes, because it's coming out of the underground bases. And
right, and they're feeding us crumbs, correct? It's just they're giving the people the crumbs, and they have the advanced technology at hand.
Yes, and so they're bringing it out as if it's a new discovery, a new development, when actually it's been known about for a ridiculously long time, more than people can imagine, in this other reality that is kept from the human reality. Now, let's start putting a few things into context here on the basis of that. And the question that has been asked, if you're bringing technology out of the underground bases and you're bringing it into the public arena, you need a cover story and cover people to make it appear as if it has randomly just appeared. And so you look at your Bill Gateses and you look at your Elon Musks, etc., and they are front vehicles for this transfer of technology into the public arena with a cover story. I remember I watched a two-part documentary. It wasn't very good because it was on the BBC, but it was a two-part documentary about Silicon Valley. It's 3 or 4 years ago now. And they had this sequence of garage doors, right? And it went, this was developed behind this garage door. This was developed behind this garage door. A series of garage doors where these various technologies were supposed to have been developed. And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I can just see this cult sitting around a table going, too many garage doors, guys. Too many garage doors. They're going to suss it. Change the cover story. No more garage doors. Because these are just literally cover stories and cover people to bring this stuff into the public arena as if it's random when it's all coordinated. So you look at Elon Musk, who, of course, is heading up, and that's all he's doing, SpaceX, which is putting up all these satellites. They want thousands and thousands of them. I mean, the astronomy community are already complaining, with the relatively few up there compared with how many they plan, that they can't see the night sky anymore, right? So so what are they putting these things up for? To beam Wi-Fi and 5G at the Earth from space as part of the creation of this AI global smart grid. So he's fronting that up. He's fronting up Tesla cars, and electrical cars are only just a stepping stone on the totalitarian tiptoe to autonomous cars where no one drives them. The computer drives them. And where will the computer not take you? Car driven by computer, not human. It will take you nowhere where the authorities don't want you to go.
Exactly.
You've also got him fronting up this company called Neuralink, which is about connecting computers to the human brain. This man is a most blatant, obvious front man for the cult agenda. Now, if you go back to Canada in the 1930s, and indeed Columbia University in the 1930s, there was developed a movement called the technocracy movement. And the technocracy movement wanted to basically replace the elected political world of government with technocrats controlling everything. This is exactly what's happening now. And the head of the technocratic party in Canada in the 1930s was the grandfather of Elon Musk. Now, that's a coincidence. He's not doing what he's doing by coincidence. And then you look at Bill Gates. Bill Gates is a classic technocrat. And the Rockefellers created the World Health Organization to control health policy from a central point in the world, because they knew this stuff that's happening now was coming. This is how long it's projected forward. And so if Trump follows through with his defunding of the World Health Organization while moving more money into a Gates organization called Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, which wants to vaccinate the world, if he removes that money from the World Health Organization, Bill Gates, technocrat, will be the biggest funder of the World Health Organization, because he's the second biggest funder up to this point. And Tedros, the Director General of the World Health Organization, when he moves his mouth, it's Gates speaking. And when Gates speaks, it's the cult speaking. He's been on the payroll of Gates organizations. Gates is running the World Health Organization, and he's a technocrat. And it's not being done by elected. What are elected politicians saying all the time? We're being led by the science, not by common sense, not by.
Did Trump stop funding him?
Say again?
Didn't Trump stop funding WHO and has distanced himself from all that? And is
that's
really
what I say. He's whether he's actually removed the money yet is another thing. But he said that he's absolutely going to do that. Yes, he is. But at the same time, he's moving more money into Gavi, which is a Gates front. And you look at the technocrat Gates, and funnily enough, in the first 85% of the answer, I mentioned Gates many times, even before the lockdowns that he came really to the fore. Because if you look at a cult wish list for human society, he's funding all of them, including Common Core education in America. He's everywhere, this guy. And if you look at Fauci and Birx, the advisors on the quote virus to Trump, they have massive financial connections to Gates. The chief medical officer, that in many ways is driving the policy in Britain through the prime minister, who's just reading the script, is a guy called Chris Whitty, massive financial connections to Bill Gates. You look at Professor Neil Ferguson and Imperial College in London, which produced the computer models, ludicrous, anyone could see it at the time, for the projected deaths if we didn't lock down, so that everyone locked down to stop that happening. Massively funded by Bill Gates. So here's a classic example in Gates of a unelected technocrat that's driving policy, not least the current policy involving this fake virus.
Let's bring in another question. What action can we take to overcome the banking cartels and international control groups? What about the 6 major media companies? Which leaders can we trust? Richard Sandilands and Tweedle.
Well, I don't think you can trust any leader. I don't think you can trust any politician per se. They have to earn that trust, not by their words, which are easy, but by their actions. So Trump's words were one thing, but his actions have been overwhelmingly another. This is not going to be changed by politicians. It's not. They're increasingly marginalized by the technocrats anyway. I mean, Silicon Valley technocrats has far more power than the American government now, not least in feeding and developing the perceptions of the population. It's going to come, and I keep coming back to it, from non-cooperation from the population. That's where it's going to come from. Non-cooperation with their own enslavement, and that means stiffening the backbone and doing things that people would rather not do, and are quite frightened or very diffident about doing, but they need doing. We need to stop. We need to say no to our own enslavement. And the precursor to that is to get informed about what's actually happening and why what is happening, and therefore realize what we have to not acquiesce to. And in terms of banking, the whole foundation of human control on one level is a sleight of hand, a criminal activity in which banks create money out of nothing called credit and charge interest on it. And if you don't pay back the figures on a screen credit that has never, does not, and will never exist, then the banks get your wealth that does exist, your home, your business, your land, your resources. And we're going to see a frenzy of that in the months ahead that will dwarf the impact of the foreclosing of 2008. And it's lending people money that doesn't exist and charging interest on it that gives the banking system power over the entire human economy. And we need to move to a financial system in which money is created interest-free, and that private companies cannot create money out of nothing called credit. Why are governments borrowing money through the Federal Reserve, which is just a private banking cartel? Why are governments borrowing money from private banks and the population paying interest on it when they're the fricking government? Issue your own currency interest free and take out the banks that way. It's possible, but you'll note that when anyone has suggested that interest-free money be created, they don't seem to live very long if they're in politics over the years, because this is a massive Achilles heel of the system, and that is the end of interest-bearing debt. We have a system whereby the money, the unit of exchange that allowed economic activity to happen and interaction and purchase and production, that starts out on day one as a debt. Because people, you say to people, and I've said this to people in banking and finance, and they haven't known. Oh, I didn't know that, they say. You ask people where money comes from, and they kind of say, oh, it's the government in it. No, it's not. The overwhelming majority of money comes into circulation by private banks lending non-existent money called credit and charging interest on it. So that basic currency comes into being at its birth as a debt. This is why the world's drowning in debt, and debt means control. So that banking system has to go and be completely changed. But what they are in the process of doing now, I mean, my books in the early 1990s were saying the plan is to get rid of cash and have it only a digital currency. Well, look at what's happened during this virus hoax.
Yeah, cash is bad now. The virus, it's contagious.
Who said avoid money and use credit cards because you can catch the virus off money? Tedros, the Director General of the World Health Organization, owned by Bill Gates, the same man who declared that there was a pandemic.
Right. Let's take another question, Dave. We have one more question, and then we're out of time.
Okay.
So one more question. Let's see what we got here. Go ahead, Laura. You can read it.
What positive actions and solutions can we take at this time? What are you doing to prepare for what lies ahead?
Well, the most positive action we can do is to stop acquiescing with our own enslavement. And that's what I'm doing. My preparations, I live a life which can be summed up as work, walking, and eating, and sleeping. So I work almost all the time, and that's not, oh, look at me, I work so hard. I love it because I love uncovering more and more stuff and picking the stones up and seeing what's underneath. And then I go out walking 3 or 4 times a week, and that's my life. So what I've done to prepare for what's coming, because they plan this hysteria in the winter. And another thing that they're planning is food shortages, which they're manipulating to have food shortages, because food shortages means control. So I'm looking after all that. I'm making sure that I get my food delivered, which is I've organized so that I don't have to go in shops and wear a mask. And I've changed things around, not that I had to change them much, to the point where I do not have to acquiesce to the system in any way, shape, or form in relation to this virus hoax. But if they then bring in, which is what they want, that you can't leave your house without wearing a mask, then I will leave my house and I will not wear a frickin' mask. And at that point, me and they are going to look each other in the eye, and we'll see where it goes from there. But I tell you what, I won't be the one to blink, because I'm 68. My self-identity is that I am a point of attention within an infinite state of consciousness. Death is just a transfer of attention. That's all death is. It's nothing more. I've got a picture in the answer of a guy just taking a virtual reality headset off, and I put a caption underneath, "My God, I've just died," because that's all it is, right? That's all it is. It's a transfer of attention. This body biological computer, as I've been calling it for decades, focuses our attention in this tiny band of frequency, and it becomes our reality. But when at death, we just withdraw from the the vehicle, and suddenly that focus that the body gives us on this tiny band of frequency is no longer there. Boom! We expand our awareness. So I'm terrified. I'm actually terrified. I have nightmares about it. Of actually leaving the body and exploring forever. You know what I mean? So
that's so beautiful.
So there's no fear, because there's nothing to fear, and fear is just a manipulated state of being, because there's nothing to fear. We are all that is, has been, and ever can be, and we will always be all that is, has been, and ever can be, and everything else is detail. So I'm just going to live my life without acquiescing to the system, and if they want to keep pushing to the point where I either stay in my little flat or I look them in the eye, then I'm going to look the buggers in the eye, and we'll see where it goes from there. But I'm not acquiescing to them. No chance.
David, thank you for being on our show. We're going to end it there. You've been a beautiful guest. I can listen to you all day long, but we're out of time. And you're like an encyclopedia of just insane amounts of. You're like a Jedi. You're a Jedi. And I just want to say thank you for being on our show, Laura. Do you have anything to say?
Oh, thank you so much, David. It was incredible. I'm just going to be listening to this again and again. I so appreciate it. And I hope you'll join us again sometime.
David, you're always welcome on our show. Is there any parting words you'd like to tell the audience?
Well, we got into this mess by believing that we are limited and believing that we have to conform to what other people say we must do and what we must be. And once you as a end in itself wish to be liked and wish to be supported as an end in itself, you have just conceded your infinite uniqueness. It's gone. Because when being liked and being supported and being told how lovely and wonderful you are is an end in itself, what you do then is you put your real self aside, you put your real opinions aside. This is happening on social media all the time. And you tell people what they want to hear, so they will like you, and they will think you're all right, and they will think you're all the things that you want people to think about you. So if you're going to be true to yourself and true to your uniqueness, then what you do is you say what you really think, and you say what you really believe. And the world will have to deal with it. Instead of you moving to the world so the world likes you and so you get absorbed into the blob of collective perception, you stand out with your uniqueness, your unique opinions, your unique perceptions of life. And the world can choose to move towards you or not. Whichever. You are still in your uniqueness. You're still celebrating your uniqueness, because we, yes, are points of attention within an infinite flow of consciousness, but we are unique points of attention. We have our unique way of looking at life. So we are all that is, but we are a unique expression of all that is. And once you lose that uniqueness, you get pulled into the collective, which is what the hive mind is and what they want. So what I would say is celebrate your unique individual self, express it. And what people make of it is up to them. That's not your problem.
Thank you, David. We're out of time.
And if lots of people do that, then the conformity that holds this cult agenda together, boom, gone.
Will collapse.
Yeah.
David, thank you for being on our show so much. It's an honor. It's an honor.
It's been a great pleasure. I've loved it. We must do it again.
Yes, we have to do it again. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, David. Okay, goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for joining us.